Hey guys, Scott here. Today I wanted to go over an experiment that I've been doing for the past few days where I wanted to see the efficacy and prevalence of hard slugging in Dead by Daylight, basically trying to win by only slugging, see if that's a rising playstyle or anything like that. I am firmly of the camp that it's not really rising at all, and even if it were to rise, it's not really that big of a deal because we have the tools to deal with it, but I still wanted to put some data to that. Now, I didn't want to do that playstyle to other people as killer because I would just feel bad. I'm not going to sit and just slug everyone to death for 50 games. That just sounds miserable. So I decided to play Survivor and count the killers that would do that to me. This was solo queue. Every single game was solo queue with the exact same build. And before you do the whole speech of, well, you're a streamer with 8 bajillion hours, I have 7 kids, and I work in a coal mine for 26 hours a day, I need to make it clear, I don't think I'm high MMR on Survivor. I don't escape even half the time. I'm playing only solo queue, and if you've played solo queue and you play pretty much only solo queue, you'll know it's pretty fucking hard to get like higher than a 50% win rate. So my win rate ain't great. So I would assume I'm probably in the trenches or in the middle bracket or whatever the hell with probably the majority of the player base. Because yeah, I'm really not winning that much. So going forward, I want to discuss the difference between the two types of slugging and define them so it makes more sense for the results. First off is opportunistic slugging. Opportunistic slugging is slugging that just simply makes sense to do. For example, if a killer downs me at a pallet and I have another teammate right next to me, obviously the killer's not just going to pick up and get pallet saved. He's going to slug me and chase the other guy, or at least hit him and chase him away for a bit. That's opportunistic slugging, and it makes sense to do that. It's just something like, even an Oni would do very frequently. When he's in his power, he downs somebody, he sees someone scream an infectious fright 10 feet away. Obviously, he's not going to pick up, cancel his power, bring him to a hook. He's going to go slug and go for the next guy. This is opportunistic slugging, and this is the type of slugging that really you shouldn't be complaining about. This is the first main point I want to make with this. If you're complaining about opportunistic slugging, I think you need to take a step back and maybe try playing killer a few times or something like that, because no one in the right mind is going to complain about someone not immediately picking up under a pallet, not immediately picking up when there's a flashlight nearby, not immediately picking up when someone's about to finish a generator. There's so many reasons to leave someone on the ground for like 10, 15 seconds, and a lot of the time it's survivor induced as well. There'll be a bunch of people grouped up, the killer downs one guy, he's not going to go, well, good luck on that generator, fellas, and just take the other guy away. He's going to generate some pressure and go and try to hit other people, and before he actually goes back and picks that person up. And I think that's completely fine. Now, of the results, we had 14 out of 50 games featured opportunistic slugging, which is, a fairly common rate. We're almost like, in a 1-3, 1-4 ratio. And I think that's completely fair. Again, I don't think opportunistic slugging is something anyone should ever complain about. It doesn't need any base kit changes. We don't need to have base unbreakable for things like this. This is just something that's part of the game. It will always be part of the game, and it's completely fine and acceptable to be part of the game. And again, I think if you disagree with this, you need to try playing killer a little bit, because the only people that would say this are people that have just never played killer before, because anyone in the right mind can see a scenario like that where you're down under a pallet or something and you don't immediately pick up. That's completely acceptable. So I wanted to make that clear. Opportunistic slugging, much more common, basically 1-3, 1-4 games, but also not a big deal. This is part of the base game. It's completely fine. Next is hard slugging. Hard slugging is the main thing we're talking about, where the primary method of winning is just slugging everyone to death. Not necessarily bleeding them out, but having all 4 players down and then picking up and killing them all on first hook. So that is a strategy that people like Choi, I know he employs that, but even he has said in his recent videos, he doesn't really see this being a widespread thing ever. And I would have to agree with that. I don't think this is ever going to be a primary strategy that people use for a number of reasons. One, despite what a lot of people that play like to say, I fully believe to a less experienced player, it's genuinely harder to do that. It's harder to keep track of. When you are just downing people and hooking people, it's a lot simpler. There's a lot less macro gameplay you have to worry about. You just down person, hook them, down person, hook. You don't think. You just do it. It's just like robotic almost. When you're trying to slug the entire team, there's a lot of shit you got to keep track of. You need to know the recovery process or the recovery progress of people. You need to know how long ago they were downed, how far they've crawled, if anyone's going to them, if any perks are in play. Did that guy have We're Gonna Live Forever last time? You have to keep track of so much shit. And a lot of inexperienced players, which is the majority of the player base, are not really capable of doing this. So just by sheer virtue of the fact, I consider it to be a bit more macro difficult. I don't think it's going to be widespread because a lot of people are just going to prefer the very simple pick up hook play style. So that's one of the main reasons I think it's not going to be a big deal. But interestingly enough, let's go over the results. Of all of the hard slugging matches where the killer did not hook anybody, they just tried to get everyone slugged to death and then pick them up, at the end there. Out of every single one, not a single killer actually won. And again, it could be for a number of reasons. One is, like I said, it's a bit complicated to do. This is not something, Johnny 20 hours in the game can figure out how to do. And again, most people are just in that level of not very good at the game. Therefore, most people even attempting the strategy are just simply not going to be very good at it. Whether that was the case here or not, I can't really say. The sample size of only 3 people actually doing it is not very large. It's so uncommon that I can't really get a gauge on whether or not they just played bad or I was playing well to counter it. Another factor, though, is the build I brought. The build I brought every game is really good at dealing with this, and that was intentional, obviously. It was to make another point that I'll get to in a minute here, but the build I brought was Decisive Strike in case there was just tunneling, Dead Hard for tunneling and also just really anything, and then we had Unbreakable for anti-slug, and We're Gonna Live Forever for anti-slug on other people. Now, in games like this, 2 of my perks did nothing. Decisive Strike and Dead Hard, absolutely useless. There was no hooks the entire game, did nothing. In this game, I don't remember, but I know in only 1 of 3 of my games, I'm not sure which one it was, I actually used Unbreakable to great effect. Really, what sold it was We're Gonna Live Forever. We're Gonna Live Forever is one of the main contributing factors to dismantling strategies like this. It's really, really good. Also, having good gameplay sense, having good macro gameplay sense as Survivor, very important to countering this as well. But We're Gonna Live Forever has immense value in countering this in terms of picking people up. So it's really, really strong at that. And this build made it so whenever the killer tried doing this, they never actually won the match. I think the best was a tie, and then the worst was a 0K. So overall, even though some killers did try this, and again, Singularity is arguably the best killer in the game that can do this. You can make a few exceptions, Twins maybe, even Blight with some good map control can do it, but Singularity is without a doubt one of the strongest killers, and one of the few killers I would argue this playstyle, when used effectively, is actually stronger than straight up hooking people. It's really good on Singularity, but if you do play well, even in solo queue, and you've got a perk or 2 to help you deal with it, it really isn't that big of a deal. Now, look, in the hands of a master Singularity doing this strategy, am I going to counter this in solo queue? No, of course not. It's solo queue. I'm going to get my ass beat by fucking anything at that point if they're really good at the killer. If it's a Blight going for 12 hooks, I'm still going to die. So I don't think that's much of really an excuse either. We need to remember that most people doing this are simply not going to be masters at doing it. And if you do go against that, you're going to lose, but you would lose against them in solo queue regardless. So it doesn't matter what they're doing. You're still going to lose. So overall, I don't think that this is going to be that big of a deal. And the game in the background, hopefully you can see the it's like guerrilla warfare almost. It's a bit ratty, like how you actually have to combat this. And the games do tend to go on for a very long time, and that can be frustrating. But I kind of found the opposite. I found these games really interesting. I found them really fun to try to counter what the killer was doing. But a lot of that is because I was equipped to deal with it. Having things that let me deal with it makes dealing with it obviously way more interesting. And I think a lot of the frustration when this happens to people is because they don't have the things to deal with it. So my suggestion, if you hate when this happens, just bring We're Gonna Live Forever. 1 perk. Dedicate a single perk to dealing with this. That's all you need. Like I said, the other 3 perks were not really used, especially if they're playing this. I'm never going to use DS or Dead Hard. And in fact, I brought Dead Hard specifically so it wouldn't get value when this happened, to show that you really only need a perk to deal with this. And I don't think that's unreasonable to ask of people. If you are really opposed to this playstyle and you really hate it, bringing a single free perk is really not a big deal. And I don't think there's any excuse in just not doing it. So that is one of the main things I wanted to go over there. I don't think that this is going to be a very big deal. Even if people start doing this more, I think the tools exist for players to combat it perfectly fine, and I think that's not really going to be a big deal. I'm not doing anything super crazy masterful. I'm just running very early when he's, coming into the area that I relatively am in. I'm going to pick people up when I see him chasing other people, and I'm using We're Gonna Live Forever aggressively if the killer is right next to me and things like that. It's not super complicated when I'm doing, and it doesn't really even require an immense amount of crazy coordination or anything like that. It's a pain in the ass. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is fun or engaging or even a really good time. Like, I don't think this is a very, very fun thing to go against, but there's a lot of shit in the game that's not really fun to get or go against. If you're getting tunneled by like a really good blight, that sucks too. It sucks in a different way, but you know, that shit still sucks as well. But the whole point is I don't think it's as big of a concern as people think they are, and this is why I'm not really a proponent of wanting to have things like a base kit unbreakable. I don't think it's necessary, and I hate saying the whole just get good thing, but not even get good, just get a perk. Just throw on We're Gonna Live Forever, and I guarantee your misery with games like this will decrease by a very, very large amount. That's really the main thing. I wanted to just go over how common it was, and I wanted to go over this shit, by the way. The body block into the failed heal tech from Lori. The fact that he even got a 2K here. Solo queue. This as an aside, this was a endurance test to just playing 50 games in solo queue in a row. That shit's torturous. But anyway, overall, yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. It's extremely rare. Again, 3 out of 50 games is very, very rare. That is not a common thing. And again, I know what's going to happen. Yeah, in my region, it's every other game. In my time of day, it's every game. In my magical MMR, it's every game. I'm just going to say the same thing I said with my tunneling video with data. No, it isn't. You're just lying. You just think that's the case because it's a very negative experience when it happens, and it's negativity bias. So you attribute it to happening way more than it actually is. And I get it. It does suck, especially if you're uncoordinated and you don't know how to deal with it or you're not equipped to deal with it. It sucks. I truly understand that. But it's not happening that much. It just isn't. And I will say the same thing I said in my tunneling video. If you believe it is, turn on a stream. You don't need a webcam. You don't need a microphone. Just turn on a stream one day of you recording for 4 hours or something of uninterrupted games, and we'll see how often it happens. Just like I offered this, same thing for the whole tunneling. No one has ever shown me that it's happening like every other game. It just isn't. So overall, it's not happening that much. Even when it does, it's not a big deal. I don't think the game needs any drastic, sweeping changes to deal with it. I think the tools exist to deal with it. And honestly, people are overall not even good enough to employ the strategy to begin with. So with all those things, I think it's fine. I don't think it's a big deal. Sucks when it happens, but I think it's overall okay. It's going to be interesting to see what they do to address this. And I'm still not opposed to a give up thing on the floor, or even, if you've been on the ground for like 2 minutes, a base get unbreakable, some insanely long requirement or something like that. I don't know. Something, I'm okay with something to make solo queue feel a little bit better. But my point is, it's not as game ruining and cataclysmic of a problem as the community makes it out to be, at least in my opinion. Again, these are all just my opinions. I'm not claiming anything as fact here. If you made it this far in the video, I hope that you understand that. Most of these things are just my opinions, but overall, that's it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.